The horses screamed as their hooves shattered the stone railing, and Gemma Harrington realized with cold clarity that she was about to die in a carriage plummeting toward a ravine she couldn't even see the bottom of. The historical reenactment had been going perfectly until 30 seconds ago. The annual Victorian Festival in the mountains of modern-day Vermont drew thousands of tourists every autumn, and Gemma had volunteered to ride in the authentic horse-drawn coach as part of the opening parade. She'd worn the elaborate burgundy gown with its tight corset and layers of silk, had smiled and waved at the crowds lining the mountain road, had felt like she'd stepped into another century entirely. Then something had spooked the horses. A sound, a shadow, she didn't know what, but the two massive black stallions had reared and bolted with a violence that sent the elderly driver tumbling from his seat. Gemma had lunged for the reins through the small window, but they dragged uselessly across the ground as the panicked animals charged straight off the designated route and toward the cliff edge that overlooked the notorious Devil's Drop. Now the carriage tilted sickeningly as the front wheels left solid ground. Gemma's scream caught in her throat as gravity seemed to pause for one impossible moment. Through the window she could see nothing but empty air and the distant blur of autumn trees far, far below. Then something massive collided with the horses. The carriage jerked so violently that Gemma's head cracked against the velvet-lined wall. Her vision exploded with stars, but through the haze she saw a figure that couldn't possibly be real. A man stood in front of the horses, his pale hands gripping their harnesses, his boots planted on the crumbling edge of the cliff. He was holding them back. Holding back 2 tons of panicked horseflesh and an antique carriage with nothing but his own strength and the few remaining feet of solid ground beneath them. The horses reared and thrashed, their eyes rolling white with terror. But the man didn't move, didn't budge. His white hair whipped around his face in the mountain wind, and even from inside the carriage, Gemma could see that his skin was as pale as fresh snow, luminous in the late afternoon light. Slowly, impossibly, he began to walk backward. The horses had no choice but to follow, their hooves scraping and sliding on the loose stones. The carriage wheels bumped back onto solid road with a jolt that rattled Gemma's teeth. The man continued pulling them backward, away from the edge, his movements smooth and controlled despite the chaos. When they were a safe distance from the ravine, he released the horses and moved so fast that Gemma's eyes couldn't track it. One moment he was at the front of the carriage. The next he was wrenching open the door beside her, his hand extended. "Are you hurt?" His voice was like velvet over steel, cultured and old-fashioned in a way that matched the Victorian costume she wore. But this was no costume on him. Everything about him screamed ancient and other and dangerous. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, ringed with silver, and they fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I don't think so," Gemma managed, though her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grasp his offered palm. The moment their skin touched, ice shot through her veins. He was cold. Not cool like someone who'd been standing in the autumn air, but cold like marble, like stone, like something that had never been warm. He pulled her from the carriage with effortless strength, steadying her when her legs nearly gave out. The layers of her gown tangled around her ankles, and his other hand came to her waist to keep her upright. Through the thick fabric and corset, she could feel the supernatural chill of him. "You're freezing," she whispered, then immediately felt stupid. The man had just saved her life by stopping 2 runaway horses with his bare hands, and she was commenting on his body temperature. Something flickered in his expression, not quite amusement, but close. "And you are extraordinarily lucky to be alive. What possessed you to ride in an antique carriage on a mountain road with inadequate safety measures?" "It's the festival, the Victorian Festival. We do this every year." Gemma broke off as shouts echoed up the road. The festival organizers and emergency personnel were running toward them, their modern clothing a jarring contrast to the historical scene. The man's jaw tightened. "You need medical attention. You struck your head." "How did you see that? You were outside the carriage." "I saw the impact register in your expression, and I can smell blood." Gemma's hand flew to her temple, and her fingers came away sticky and red. She hadn't even felt the pain through the adrenaline. "Oh, Miss Harrington." The festival director, a flustered woman named Patricia, came huffing up the road, her Renaissance fair costume fluttering. "Oh my God, we saw the whole thing from the square. Are you all right?" And you, sir, I don't know how to thank you. That was the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed. Are you one of the stunt performers from the evening show? The man's expression remained perfectly neutral. I simply happened to be in the right place. I suggest you ensure your animals are properly secured before continuing your festivities. His tone made it clear this was not a suggestion. And this woman needs immediate medical care. Before Patricia could respond, he turned back to Gemma. May I see your wound? She nodded numbly, still processing everything that had happened. His cold fingers parted her hair with surprising gentleness, and she heard his sharp intake of breath. The bleeding is minimal, but you likely have a concussion. You should not be alone tonight. His eyes met hers, and there was something in that gaze that made her entire body respond with a confusing mixture of fear and attraction. Do you have someone who can monitor you? I live alone, Gemma heard herself say. I mean, I have friends, but they're all working the festival tonight. I was supposed to work at 2 in the Historical Society tent. You will not be working anywhere tonight. You will be resting. Again, that tone that brooked no argument. Patricia was already calling for the festival's medical team, a volunteer group of nurses and EMTs who staffed the event. As they approached with their kit, the strange man stepped back, his eyes never leaving Gemma's face. I should go, he said quietly, and something in her chest squeezed with panic at the thought of him leaving. Wait, I don't even know your name. I need to thank you properly. He tilted his head slightly, studying her with those unnerving gray eyes. Nikolai Shadowmere, and you are Gemma Harrington, as your friend so helpfully announced. Nikolai, she repeated, and his name felt strange and right on her tongue. Will you be at the festival? Later, I mean? I want to properly thank you for saving my life. Perhaps. He took another step back, and the late afternoon sun that had been hidden behind clouds chose that moment to break through. Golden light spilled across the mountain road, and Nikolai Shadowmere moved so quickly he was a blur, disappearing into the tree line before Gemma could blink. The EMTs surrounded her then, asking questions and shining lights in her eyes, but she barely heard them. She was staring at the place where Nikolai had vanished, her mind racing. The impossible strength, the inhuman speed, the cold, cold skin, and those strange eyes. The way he'd recoiled from direct sunlight. It wasn't possible. Vampires weren't real. They were myths, stories, Halloween costumes. But she'd touched him, felt his icy hand on her waist, seen him stop 2 horses that should have dragged him straight off that cliff. Miss Harrington, can you tell me what day it is? One of the EMTs asked, and Gemma forced herself to focus on the questions, on the here and now. But part of her mind stayed in those woods, where a man named Nikolai Shadowmere had disappeared from sunlight as if it could burn him. They wouldn't let her go home alone. Patricia insisted on driving her back to her small apartment in town, fussing the entire way about liability and insurance and how grateful they all were that she wasn't seriously hurt. Gemma made appropriate responses, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Her apartment was on the 2nd floor of a converted Victorian house, which felt grimly appropriate given the day's events. Patricia helped her inside, made sure she had food and water, and extracted a promise that Gemma would call if she felt worse. The moment the door closed behind the festival director, Gemma went to her laptop. She felt ridiculous typing "how to identify a vampire" into the search engine, but the results were surprisingly extensive. Modern folklore and mythology sites mixed with historical accounts and purported true stories. She filtered through the obvious fiction and focused on the consistent details that appeared across multiple cultures and time periods. Pale skin and unusual eyes, aversion to sunlight, superhuman strength and speed, cold body temperature, enhanced senses, particularly smell. Most of the sites mentioned bloodlust and feeding, but Nikolai hadn't tried to hurt her. He'd saved her. Gemma touched the bandage the EMTs had applied to her temple. She should be resting, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. If vampires were real, truly real, what did that mean? Were there others? Was there a whole hidden world existing alongside normal human society? The sun set early in the mountains, especially in late October. By 6 p.m., full darkness had fallen outside her windows. Gemma made herself eat some soup, took the painkillers the EMTs had recommended, and tried to settle on her couch with a book. She made it through 3 pages before the knock came at her door. She knew it was him before she looked through the peephole. Some instinct deeper than logic told her that Nikolai Shadowmere was standing in her hallway. When she opened the door, he was dressed differently than before. Instead of the clothing that had seemed to blur between historical and modern, he now wore tailored black pants and a dark gray shirt that made his pale skin and white hair even more striking. He looked like he'd stepped out of a high-fashion magazine, except no model had ever had eyes that intense. "You shouldn't open your door without verifying who's there," he said without preamble, "especially after a head injury that might affect your judgment. I knew it was you. That doesn't negate my point." But he didn't move to come inside, just stood in the hallway looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "How are you feeling?" "Like I survived something impossible." Gemma stepped back, opening the door wider. "Do you want to come in?" Something flickered across his face. "Are you inviting me inside your home, Gemma Harrington?" The formal way he phrased it made her pause. According to the mythology, vampires needed to be invited across thresholds. It was such a ridiculous notion that she almost laughed, except nothing about this day had been normal. "Yes, I'm inviting you in, Nikolai Shadowmere." He stepped across the threshold, and Gemma felt the moment shift into something significant, though she couldn't have explained why. He closed the door behind him with careful precision, then turned to study her small apartment with those unsettling eyes. "You live alone in a building with inadequate security, and you invite strange men inside. You seem determined to test the limits of your mortality." "Strange men who saved my life," Gemma countered, moving to the couch and gesturing for him to sit. He remained standing. "And you came to check on me, which suggests you're not planning to murder me in my own apartment. There are many things worse than murder. Are you trying to scare me?" "I'm trying to make you understand that you should be scared." But he said it with an undertone of frustration, as if he didn't actually want her to be afraid of him. "You hit your head today. You should not be alone. Where are your friends, your family?" "My parents live in Boston. My friends are all busy with the festival." Gemma sat down, suddenly exhausted. "And I'm pretty sure you came here because you knew I'd be alone and you were worried about me, so you can drop the intimidating vampire routine." The silence that followed her words was deafening. Nikolai stared at her, his expression frozen, and Gemma felt her heart start to pound. She'd just accused him of being a vampire, out loud, to his face. "You're remarkably calm about that accusation," he finally said, his voice dangerously soft. "I watched you stop 2 runaway horses with your bare hands. I felt how cold your skin is. I saw you disappear when the sunlight hit you. Either you're a vampire, or I'm having the world's most vivid concussion-induced hallucination." Gemma met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away. "Which is it?" Nikolai moved then, crossing the space between them with that inhuman speed. He was suddenly crouched in front of her, close enough that she could see silver flecks in his gray eyes, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him. "You should be terrified," he said, and there was something raw in his voice now. "You should be screaming, running, calling for help. I am a predator, Gemma. My kind has hunted yours since the dawn of civilization. The only reason you're alive right now is because I have more control than most, but that control is not infinite. Your heartbeat is racing, your blood is singing, and every instinct I have is telling me to bite." "But you won't," Gemma said, and she realized with distant surprise that she meant it. "You saved me today. You came here to check on me. If you were going to hurt me, you wouldn't have bothered with any of that. You don't know what I want. Then tell me." He stared at her for a long moment, then stood abruptly, pacing to her window. "I am Nikolai Shadowmere, King of the Northern Territories, Lord of the Eternal Court, and bearer of the Crimson Seal. I have existed for over 800 years, and in all that time, I have never been as reckless as I was today." He turned to face her, and his expression was a mixture of anger and something that looked almost like fear. "I revealed myself in front of dozens of humans. I used my strength openly, where cameras could have captured it. I should have let you die." The words should have hurt, but Gemma heard what he wasn't saying. "But you couldn't." "No." The admission seemed torn from him. "I was in the forest, hunting, when I heard the horses bolt. I saw the carriage heading for the ravine, saw you through the window, and I moved without thinking. It was instinct, pure and simple, and it may have exposed our entire world." "Our entire world," Gemma repeated. "You mean there are more vampires? A society?" Nikolai's laugh was bitter. "A society. A kingdom. Courts and councils and ancient laws that govern how we interact with humanity. One of those laws is that we never reveal ourselves. Humans who learn of our existence are either brought into our world permanently or they are eliminated. There are no exceptions." The threat in those words was clear, but so was the anguish behind them. Gemma stood, her legs shaky but determined, and crossed to where he stood by the window. "Then why tell me all this? If I'm either going to be turned or killed, why explain it?" "Because you deserve to understand what I've done to you." He looked down at her, and in the lamplight, his pale face seemed carved from marble. "The moment I stopped those horses, I tied your fate to mine. The council will hear about today's events. They will investigate. They will find you. And when they do, they will demand to know what I intend to do about the human witness to a vampire's power. What are you going to do?" "I don't know." The confession seemed to cost him. "I should have glamored you immediately, made you forget what you saw. But your head injury made that dangerous. Mental manipulation after a concussion can cause permanent damage. I told myself I would wait until you healed, but the truth is—" He trailed off, his jaw tight. "The truth is what?" Gemma prompted softly. "The truth is I don't want you to forget." The words came out rough, almost angry. "From the moment I saw you in that carriage, something in my blood sang. 800 years of perfect control, and one human woman in a ridiculous Victorian gown made me throw it all away without a second thought. You should mean nothing to me. You should be as insignificant as any other mortal. But when I thought of you dying, of your heart stopping and your blood going cold, I couldn't bear it." Gemma's breath caught. She should be processing the impossible things he was telling her, the talk of councils and laws and glamoring, but all she could focus on was the raw emotion in his voice. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Neither do I." Nikolai reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her bandage with cold fingers. "But I know that I cannot let the council take you. I know that I will fight my own kind if necessary to keep you safe. And I know that this is either the beginning of something catastrophic or something that might redeem 8 centuries of darkness." His hand fell away, and he stepped back. "You need to rest. Your head must be aching, and I've said far too much already. Lock your door when I leave. Don't go out after dark tomorrow. I will return the following night with a plan." "What kind of plan?" "One that keeps you alive and free. That's all I can promise." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Gemma, if anyone else comes to you asking about what happened today, tell them nothing. Don't confirm or deny anything. Simply say you don't remember clearly because of your injury. Can you do that?" "Are you asking me to lie to protect you?" "I'm asking you to lie to protect yourself. The vampires who might come won't be like me. They won't have spent centuries learning to value human life. They will see you as either food or a problem to be solved, and I need time to prevent both outcomes." Gemma nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll say I don't remember clearly." "Good." He opened the door, then looked back at her one more time. "And Gemma, thank you for inviting me in. It means more than you know." Then he was gone, moving too fast for her to see, leaving only the faint scent of cold wind and something darker, something that made her think of ancient stone and deep forests and night itself. Gemma locked the door as instructed, then stood in her small apartment trying to process everything that had just happened. She'd learned that vampires were real, that their king had saved her life, that she was now in danger from an entire hidden world she'd never known existed, and that Nikolai Shadowmere, ancient and powerful and terrifying, had looked at her like she was somehow important. She touched her bandage, feeling the ache beneath it, and wondered if concussions normally came with this level of insanity. But no, this was real. All of it was real. And somewhere in the night, a vampire king was trying to figure out how to save her from his own people. Gemma didn't sleep well. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound outside her window made her jump. She kept remembering the cold weight of Nikolai's hand on her waist, the silver in his storm-gray eyes, the way he'd said her name like it was something precious. Morning came with weak sunlight and the realization that she needed to go to work. She'd promised to help with the festival's historical society tent all weekend, and calling in sick would draw attention she apparently couldn't afford. The bandage on her head was small enough to hide beneath her hair, and the headache had faded to a dull throb. The festival grounds were transformed in daylight. Victorian banners fluttered from every lamppost, vendors sold period-appropriate crafts and foods, and actors in elaborate costumes performed scenes from classic literature on portable stages. Gemma's job was to man the historical society tent, where they displayed artifacts and documents from the region's Victorian era and answered questions from tourists. She'd been there for an hour, mechanically explaining the history of the local mill town, when a man entered the tent who made every instinct in her body scream danger. He was beautiful in the same way Nikolai was beautiful, with that otherworldly quality that seemed just slightly wrong. His skin was pale but had a warmer tone than Nikolai's snow-white complexion, and his hair was silver rather than pure white. He wore modern clothes, a leather jacket and dark jeans, but something about the way he moved was ancient. "Good morning," he said, and his smile didn't reach his ice-blue eyes. "I'm researching the accident that occurred yesterday, the one with the runaway carriage. I understand you were the passenger." Gemma's heart hammered, but she forced herself to smile politely. "Yes, that was terrifying. I'm just grateful someone managed to stop the horses." "Indeed. This someone, did you get a good look at him?" "Not really. Everything happened so fast, and I hit my head pretty hard." Gemma gestured vaguely to her bandage. "The doctors said I might have some memory gaps from the concussion." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "How convenient. But surely you remember something about your rescuer, his appearance, his name, perhaps?" "I'm sorry, but I really don't remember clearly. The festival director might know more." She spoke with him after. Gemma kept her voice steady, channeling every acting skill she'd learned in college theater. "Is there something specific you needed? Are you with the police?" "Something like that." He stepped closer, and Gemma caught a whiff of that same cold scent she'd noticed on Nikolai. "It's important that we locate this individual. He may have information relevant to our investigation." "Investigation into what? It was just an accident." "Was it?" His smile widened, showing too many teeth. "Two horses perfectly trained for carriage work suddenly bolt toward a ravine, and a stranger with exceptional strength appears from nowhere to save you. That seems rather orchestrated, don't you think?" Fear spiked through Gemma, but she forced a confused laugh. "Orchestrated? That's absurd. Why would anyone arrange something like that? I could have died." "Unless your rescuer knew he would be there to save you. Unless the entire thing was designed to create a connection between you and him." The man leaned on the display table, his cold eyes boring into hers. "Tell me, Miss Harrington, has this mysterious savior contacted you since yesterday?" "No," Gemma lied, and prayed her face didn't betray her. "I went home, took some painkillers, and slept. That's it." The vampire, because that's clearly what he was, studied her for a long moment. Then he straightened, pulling a card from his jacket pocket and placing it on the table between them. "If you remember anything, or if anyone contacts you about the incident, call this number immediately. It's very important, Miss Harrington, for your own safety." He left without another word, moving through the festival crowd with predatory grace. Gemma waited until he was completely out of sight before allowing herself to shake. She picked up his card with trembling fingers. There was no name, just a phone number embossed in silver on black cardstock. The rest of her shift dragged by in a haze of anxiety. Every pale-skinned person who entered the tent made her tense. She kept expecting more vampires to appear, to question her, to see through her lies. By the time her replacement arrived at 4 p.m., Gemma felt like her nerves were frayed to breaking. She went home by a circuitous route, checking constantly to make sure she wasn't followed. The sun was already setting by the time she reached her apartment, the short autumn day rushing toward night. She'd just locked her door and kicked off her shoes when her phone rang. Unknown number. Gemma stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Miss Harrington, this is Detective Chen with the Vermont State Police. I'm calling about the incident yesterday at the festival. Do you have a few minutes to answer some questions? Actual police. Gemma felt a rush of relief mixed with new anxiety. Of course. The detective's questions were thorough but straightforward. He wanted to know exactly what had happened, whether she'd noticed anything strange before the horses bolted, and whether she'd gotten contact information from her rescuer. Gemma stuck to her story about the concussion affecting her memory, and the detective seemed satisfied. One more thing, he said before hanging up. Have you been contacted by anyone claiming to be investigating the incident? Anyone who wasn't clearly law enforcement? Gemma's grip tightened on her phone. Actually, yes. A man came to the festival tent today asking questions. He said he was investigating, but he didn't show identification. He gave me a card with just a phone number on it. Don't call that number. Detective Chen's voice sharpened. And don't speak to anyone else who contacts you without verification. We've had reports of scammers targeting people involved in accidents, trying to gather information for identity theft or fraud. If anyone else approaches you, ask for credentials and call the police if something feels off. I will. Thank you. After hanging up, Gemma realized the detective had inadvertently given her the perfect cover story. If more vampires came asking questions, she could claim she thought they were scammers and refused to cooperate. It wasn't much, but it was something. Darkness fell completely, and Gemma made herself eat dinner, though she had no appetite. Every minute felt like an hour as she waited for Nikolai to return with his plan. What if something had happened to him? What if other vampires had found out about his involvement and punished him? What if he'd decided it wasn't worth the risk and she'd never see him again? That last thought hurt more than it should. She'd met him yesterday. One conversation, a few intense moments, and somehow he'd become important to her. It was ridiculous. It was also undeniable. At 10 p.m., when she'd almost given up hope, the knock came. Gemma flew to the door and yanked it open to find Nikolai standing in her hallway, looking grimmer than before. "We have less time than I thought," he said without greeting. "May I come in?" "Of course." She stepped aside, and he entered with that same careful precision she'd noticed before, as if he was hyper-aware of crossing her threshold. "A vampire came to the festival today. He asked questions about you." Nikolai's expression darkened. "Describe him." "Pale, silver hair, ice-blue eyes, cold like you, but not as—" She trailed off, searching for the right word. "Controlled," Nikolai finished grimly. "That was likely Dorian, one of the council's enforcers. What did you tell him?" "Nothing. I said I didn't remember clearly because of my concussion, and that I hadn't seen you since the accident." "Good." He moved to her window, peering out at the street below. "The council is moving faster than anticipated. Dorian's presence means they're not just investigating, they're actively hunting. They know I was involved, and they're trying to find proof." "How do they know it was you?" "Because I am the only vampire powerful enough to stop a runaway carriage that way, and the only one who would care enough about a human's life to risk exposure." He turned back to her, and his expression was fierce. "The council sees humans as either food sources or potential security threats. The idea that I saved you simply because I couldn't bear to watch you die, that concept is foreign to most of my kind. But not to you. No, not to me." He crossed to her in 2 long strides. "I spent my first century as a vampire reveling in power and bloodlust. The next 3 centuries, building a kingdom based on strength and fear. But the past 400 years, I've been trying to be something different, better. I've worked to create laws that protect humans from indiscriminate feeding, to build a society where vampires and mortals can coexist without constant violence. The council tolerates my reforms, but they don't truly accept them. If they find proof that I risked our secrecy for a human's life, they will use it to undermine everything I've built." "Then what do? "We run," Nikolai said bluntly. "I have resources, safe houses that the council doesn't know about, places where I can keep you protected while I figure out a more permanent solution." Gemma's mind reeled. "Run. I can't just disappear. I have a job, a life. My family will worry. My friends will forget about you faster than you think if you're dead." Nikolai's voice was harsh, but his eyes were anguished. "I'm sorry, Gemma. This isn't fair, and you don't deserve to have your life destroyed because I couldn't control myself. But the choice now is between running with me or facing the council's judgment, and I promise you that judgment will be swift and final. What about the police? Can't they protect me? From what? Pale strangers asking questions? Human law enforcement can't help you against creatures they don't believe exist. He moved closer, and she could feel the cold radiating from him. I know I'm asking the impossible. I know you have no reason to trust me beyond one act of rescue, but I am offering you the only chance at survival I can give you. Come with me tonight. Let me take you somewhere safe while I negotiate with the council. Negotiate what? Your freedom, your life, the right for you to return to your world without being hunted. His hand lifted, hovering near her cheek but not quite touching. I am a king, Gemma. I have allies, resources, ancient favors I can call in. I will find a way to fix this, but I need time, and I need you to be somewhere they can't reach you. Gemma's heart pounded. Everything in her screamed that this was insane, that running away with a vampire king was beyond reckless. But she remembered the silver-haired vampire from the festival, the cold calculation in his eyes, the way he'd asked questions like he already knew the answers. How long would we be running? I don't know. Days, weeks, possibly months? Nikolai's expression was raw with honesty. I won't lie to you about that. This won't be quick or easy. And if I say no, if I try to handle this on my own, then you'll be dead within 3 days, and I'll have to live with the knowledge that I saved you from a ravine only to feed you to wolves. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Please don't make me live with that. The vulnerability in those words decided her. This ancient, powerful creature was practically begging her to let him protect her, and something in Gemma responded to that on a level she didn't fully understand. Okay, she said. I'll go with you. But I need to pack, and I need to leave some kind of explanation for my family so they don't think I've been kidnapped or murdered. Relief flooded Nikolai's features. Pack quickly and lightly, we'll be moving often, and your message needs to be vague. Tell them you've taken a sudden opportunity to travel, that you'll be out of contact for a while, but you're safe. Gemma moved to her bedroom and pulled out a duffel bag, her hands shaking as she tried to decide what to bring. Clothes, toiletries, her laptop, phone charger, medications. What did you pack when running from vampires? She settled for practical items and a few sentimental photographs, then sat down to compose a text message to her mother. Mom, something unexpected came up and I'm going to be traveling for a while. No need to worry, everything's fine, but I might be hard to reach. I'll call when I can. Love you. It was inadequate and would definitely cause worry, but it was better than vanishing without a word. She sent similar messages to her 2 closest friends, then turned off her phone at Nikolai's instruction. They can track phones, he explained. Leave it here. I'll provide you with a secure device if you need one. Within 20 minutes, Gemma was standing in her apartment with her duffel bag, staring at her life and wondering if she'd ever see it again. Nikolai watched her with those storm-gray eyes, patient and still as a statue. Ready? He asked softly. No, but let's go anyway. He picked up her bag with one hand and offered his other arm. Hold on to me. We'll be moving quickly. Gemma gripped his arm, and the cold of him seeped through his shirt sleeve. He led her down the stairs and out into the dark street, where a sleek black car waited at the curb. It looked expensive and fast, exactly what she'd expect a vampire king to drive. But Nikolai didn't open the car door. Instead, he turned to face the shadows pooling under a nearby streetlight. I was wondering when you'd reveal yourself, he said calmly. 3 figures emerged from the darkness, the silver-haired vampire from the festival and 2 others. A woman with white blonde hair, and a man whose dark coloring made his pale skin seem to glow. All 3 moved with that same predatory grace. Your Majesty, the silver-haired one said with mock courtesy. How fortuitous to find you here, with the very human we've been seeking, no less. Dorian, Nikolai's voice was ice. You're a long way from council territory. The council sent us to investigate a potential breach of the first law. Imagine our surprise when our investigation led straight to the king of the Northern Territories. Dorian's eyes flicked to Gemma, and she felt pinned by that cold gaze. And here he is, clearly preparing to abscond with the human witness. That seems rather incriminating, doesn't it? What it is none of your concern. The woman is under my protection. Your protection. the blonde woman said, her voice like silk over razors. How interesting. The council will definitely want to hear about this. The king who spent centuries preaching about discretion and laws, throwing it all away for one fragile human. Careful, Seraphine, Nikolai said softly. You're speaking about your sovereign. A sovereign who appears to have lost his objectivity. The dark-haired vampire spoke for the first time. The council has the right to question any potential threat to our security. We'll be taking the human for interrogation. Over my corpse. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Power rolled off Nikolai in waves, making the streetlights flicker and the shadows dance. Gemma felt it pressing against her skin, ancient and vast and utterly inhuman. The three council vampires took an involuntary step back. You would defy the council directly? Dorian asked, and for the first time there was uncertainty in his voice. I would defend what's mine, Nikolai corrected. This woman is under my personal protection. That makes her inviolate by every law we hold sacred. Or have you forgotten that I am not just a king, but the bearer of the Crimson Seal? My word is law in the Northern Territories, and these streets fall within my domain. For now, Seraphine said. But the council can challenge that claim, especially if you're abusing your authority to shelter a security risk. Then let them challenge me. Let them bring their accusations and their evidence before the full court. But until that happens, you have no authority over this woman. Nikolai's eyes glowed silver in the darkness. Leave. Now. Before I demonstrate why I've held my crown for 8 centuries while others have fallen. The three vampires exchanged glances. Some wordless communication passed between them, and then Dorian inclined his head in a gesture that was barely respectful. The council will hear of this, Majesty. All of it. I'm counting on it. Nikolai waited until they'd melted back into the shadows before turning to Gemma. Get in the car, we're leaving now. Gemma's legs felt like jelly, but she managed to stumble to the passenger door. Nikolai was already behind the wheel by the time she'd buckled her seatbelt, and he pulled away from the curb with controlled speed. What just happened? Gemma asked when she could find her voice. You said they were council enforcers. Doesn't that mean they outrank you? No. The council governs vampire society as a whole, but I am a territorial king. Within my lands, my word supersedes theirs. They can petition for my removal or challenge my decisions, but they cannot directly countermand my orders. Nikolai's hands tightened on the steering wheel. However, by claiming you as under my personal protection, I've tied our fates together in a way that will have consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind where the council will assume you're either my human servant, my blood source, or... He trailed off, jaw tight. Or what? Or my intended mate, which is the only reason a vampire king would defy the council to protect a specific human. Gemma's breath caught. But we barely know each other. I'm aware. His voice was strained, but by vampire law, intent matters more than reality. The moment I claimed you as mine, I declared to every vampire who heard me that you are important enough to fight for, to defy the council for, and there's only one thing important enough to warrant that level of protection. Oh, Gemma stared out the window at the dark mountains sliding past. So they think we're together, romantically. They think I intend to bind you to me permanently, either as a vampire or as something rarer, a protected mortal consort. Nikolai glanced at her, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trap you in this position, but it was the only argument they would respect, the only claim they couldn't immediately override. It's okay. I mean, it's completely insane, but I understand why you did it. Gemma tried to process everything. Where are we going? North. I have a private estate near the Canadian border, deep in the forest. It's heavily warded and protected, unknown to the council. We'll be safe there while I make arrangements. Arrangements for what? For your future. I need to call in favors, negotiate with old allies, and prepare for a confrontation with the council that's now inevitable. He took a sharp turn onto a smaller road that led up into the mountains. They'll demand a formal hearing. I'll have to present evidence that you're not a security risk, that your knowledge of our world won't threaten the secrecy we've maintained for millennia. How do you prove that? With difficulty. A ghost of dark humor touched his voice. typically by demonstrating that the human is bound to a vampire through blood or loyalty, unlikely to betray us. But you're neither my servant nor my willing companion. You're just an innocent person I've dragged into nightmare politics." "Maybe not entirely innocent," Gemma said quietly. "I could have refused to go with you. I could have insisted on taking my chances with the police or hiding on my own, but I chose to trust you." Nikolai looked at her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "Why? You have every reason to fear me, to see me as just another monster. Yet you invited me into your home. You're sitting in this car heading into the wilderness with a creature who could kill you without effort. Why trust me?" "Because you saved me," Gemma said simply. "And because when you look at me, I don't feel like prey. I feel like I matter." The silence that followed her words was charged with something electric. Nikolai's hands flexed on the steering wheel, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough. "You do matter. Far more than is wise or safe or explicable. I've existed for 800 years, Gemma. I've known countless humans, watched civilizations rise and fall, seen beauty and horror that would shatter mortal minds. And yet when I saw you in that carriage, something in my long-dead heart seized with terror. The thought of you dying, of your light being extinguished, was unacceptable. It still is. That's what you meant yesterday about your blood singing. Yes, it's not something I've felt before. I've had lovers over the centuries, humans and vampires alike. I've felt attraction, even affection, but this is different. Primal, as if some fundamental part of me recognized you and decided you were worth destroying my carefully maintained political position for." Gemma's chest felt tight. "Is that a vampire thing? Like a supernatural bond?" "I don't know. True mate bonds are the stuff of legend even among my kind. Most consider them myth, romantic stories with no basis in reality. But there are old tales of vampires who found their destined match, who would burn in sunlight before allowing harm to come to that one person." He glanced at her again. "If such bonds exist, they're exceedingly rare, and they don't care about convenience or propriety or council politics. So you might be supernaturally bonded to me, or you might just be having a very intense midlife crisis after 800 years. A startled laugh escaped him, the first time she'd heard him make a sound of genuine amusement. "When you put it that way, I'm not sure which option is more disturbing." Despite everything, Gemma smiled. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're having a crisis. I think you're just a person, vampire or not, who did the right thing without calculating the cost first. That's admirable, not crazy. Most of the council would disagree with you on that assessment." They drove for another 2 hours, the roads getting progressively smaller and rougher. Gemma dozed off at some point, exhausted from stress and the lingering effects of her concussion. When she woke, they were pulling up a long, tree-lined drive toward a sprawling estate that looked like it belonged in a Gothic novel. The house was built of dark stone with sharp angles and towering windows. Ivy climbed the walls, and moonlight painted everything in shades of silver and shadow. It should have been sinister, but instead it felt strangely welcoming, like a fortress promising safety. "Welcome to Shadowmere Hall," Nikolai said as he parked in front of the main entrance. "It's been my private retreat for the past 2 centuries. Very few know of its existence." "It's beautiful," Gemma said honestly, in a dramatically Gothic way. "I've always appreciated the aesthetic of my era." He came around to open her door, offering his hand. "Come, you must be exhausted." The inside of the house matched the outside. Dark wood, heavy furniture, artwork that looked centuries old. But there were modern touches too. Electric lights, contemporary kitchen appliances visible through a doorway, heating vents that kept the space warm despite the autumn chill. Nikolai led her up a sweeping staircase to the 2nd floor, down a hallway lined with portraits of pale-faced people in historical dress. He stopped at a door near the end. This will be your room. The bathroom is through there, and you'll find everything you need. The wards on this house prevent anyone from entering without my express permission, so you're safe to sleep without fear." He hesitated, then added, "My chambers are at the opposite end of the hall if you need anything." "Thank you." Gemma stepped into the room and found it surprisingly comfortable. A large four-poster bed dominated the space, but there was also a sitting area with modern furniture and shelves full of books. Nikolai, what happens now? Now you rest. Tomorrow evening, after sunset, I'll begin making calls to my allies. The council will schedule a hearing within the month, and I need to have my arguments prepared by then. His expression was grave. I won't lie to you, Gemma. The next few weeks will be difficult, but I will do everything in my power to ensure you come through this safely. And what about you? Will you be safe? Something flickered in his eyes. I'm more concerned with your safety than my own. That's not an answer. No, it's not. He moved toward the door, then paused. The council could strip me of my crown. They could exile me or imprison me, or even execute me for treason if they decide I've put vampire society at risk. But none of those outcomes matter if you're harmed in the process. Do you understand? I can bear any punishment they devise, but I cannot bear the thought of failing to protect you. Before Gemma could respond, he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him. She stood alone in the beautiful, strange room and tried to process everything. A vampire king was preparing to go to war with his own government for her. An ancient, powerful creature had declared that her safety mattered more than his crown, his freedom, even his life. It was too much, all of it. Gemma sank onto the bed and let herself shake with reactions she'd been suppressing for 2 days. She'd nearly died. She'd learned vampires were real. She'd been hunted by creatures from nightmare and claimed by a king from legend. Her normal life had been utterly destroyed, and she had no idea if she'd ever get it back. But underneath the fear and shock was something else. A warmth in her chest when she remembered how Nikolai looked at her. A sense of rightness that defied logic. She barely knew him, had spent maybe an hour total in his presence, yet some part of her had already decided he was important, worth trusting, worth following into danger. Gemma changed into sleep clothes from her duffel bag and crawled under the heavy blankets. Despite her racing thoughts, exhaustion pulled her under quickly. Her last conscious thought was wondering if Nikolai would actually be able to sleep, or if he'd spend the night pacing and planning, trying to figure out how to save them both. She woke to afternoon sunlight, streaming through windows she didn't remember opening. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't place where she was. Then memory crashed back, and she sat up with a gasp. Shadowmere Hall. The vampire estate. She was hiding from the council with Nikolai. A note on her bedside table caught her attention, elegant handwriting on heavy paper. Gemma, I hope you slept well. There's food in the kitchen, and the house is yours to explore as you wish. The wards will prevent you from leaving the grounds, but you're safe to move freely inside them. I must rest during daylight hours, but I'll find you after sunset. Ends. Right. Vampires and sunlight. She'd almost forgotten that critical detail. Gemma got up and padded to the window, looking out at the surrounding forest. The estate was even more impressive in daylight, with manicured gardens and stone pathways winding between ancient trees. It looked like something from a fairy tale, beautiful and isolated, and slightly unreal. She spent the day exploring the house. The library alone could have kept her occupied for weeks, with floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with books in multiple languages. Some looked ancient enough to be museum pieces. The kitchen was fully stocked, and she made herself a late breakfast, while trying not to think too hard about how Nikolai had known what human food to keep on hand. There was a music room with a grand piano and various string instruments, a conservatory full of night-blooming flowers, a gallery with paintings that spanned centuries. Every room revealed more about the vampire who'd lived here in secret for 200 years. Gemma found herself drawn back to the library as evening approached. She was curled in an armchair with a book about vampire mythology, which felt surreal given her current situation, when she heard footsteps in the hall. Nikolai appeared in the doorway, and Gemma's breath caught. He was wearing dark pants and a white shirt that made his pale skin seem to glow in the lamplight. His white hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd just woken, and there was something softer about his expression than she'd seen before. "Good evening," he said. "I hope you found everything you needed. Your house is incredible. The library alone is amazing." Gemma set down her book. "Have you really collected all these yourself?" "Over centuries, yes. Books were my comfort during the difficult years when I was trying to become something more than a mindless predator." He moved into the room, trailing his fingers along the spines of the books. Every volume here represents a piece of humanity I wanted to understand. History, philosophy, poetry, science. I devoured it all, trying to remember what it meant to value life beyond its utility as food. It must have been lonely. It was. Still is, in many ways. He turned to face her. Immortality sounds appealing until you realize it means watching everyone you care about age and die while you remain unchanged. Most vampires solve this by simply not caring, by treating humans as temporary diversions at best. I tried that approach for my first century. It nearly destroyed what remained of my humanity. Gemma stood, drawn across the room toward him. So you built this place, a refuge from the vampire world. A place where I could remember who I'd been before the darkness took me. His gray eyes met hers. I was born in 1214, the youngest son of a minor noble in what's now Germany. I had 2 older brothers who would inherit everything, so I was destined for the church. But then the wars came, and I became a soldier instead. I was good at killing, too good. It made me arrogant. What happened? I challenged the wrong enemy on the wrong night. A vampire commander who decided I'd be more useful as one of his soldiers than as a corpse. He turned me on a battlefield outside Prague, and I woke 3 days later craving blood with an intensity that obliterated everything else. Nikolai's expression was distant, lost in memory. I spent a century as his weapon, killing, feeding, reveling in power. When he finally released me from his service, I'd forgotten how to be anything but a monster. But you learned. You became a king, created laws to protect humans. It took 3 more centuries of mistakes and regrets. He focused on her again. The point is, I know what it means to lose yourself to darkness, and I know what it takes to claw your way back. That library, this house, the laws I've spent 400 years crafting, they're all part of my attempt to prove that vampires don't have to be the monsters humans fear. We can be more. Better. And the council disagrees? The council thinks I'm naive at best, dangerously sentimental at worst. They tolerate my reforms because I'm powerful enough to enforce them, but they'd prefer the old ways. Vampires taking what they want, humans living in ignorance or terror. To them, secrecy is about maintaining our advantage, not protecting human life. Gemma moved closer, drawn by the pain in his voice. But you saved me anyway, even knowing it would give them ammunition against you. I couldn't help myself. Looking at you in that carriage, your eyes wide with fear, knowing you had seconds to live. Something in me simply couldn't allow it. His hand lifted, hesitating near her face. May I? She nodded, and his cold fingers brushed her cheek with impossible gentleness. The touch sent shivers through her, but not from fear. I've made your life infinitely more complicated, he murmured. You should hate me for it. I should probably be terrified of you, but I'm not. Somehow, despite everything, I feel safer with you than I did in my normal life. Gemma leaned into his touch. Is that crazy? If it is, we're both mad. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I've spent 2 days trying to convince myself this is just unusual circumstances creating false intimacy. That once the immediate danger passes, you'll return to your life and forget about me. But I don't think I can forget you, Gemma. I don't think I want to. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What are you saying? I'm saying that the council assumed we're bound together, and perhaps they're not entirely wrong. Not through magic or compulsion, but through something simpler and more complicated. His other hand came up to frame her face, his storm-gray eyes intense. I'm saying that in 800 years, I've never felt drawn to someone the way I'm drawn to you. And I'm saying that if you asked me right now to forget the politics and the danger and just kiss you, I would do it without hesitation. Gemma's breath caught. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was too fast, too intense, too impossible. She'd known him for 3 days. He was a vampire, an 800-year-old king. This couldn't be real, but the way he was looking at her felt real. The cold touch of his hands felt real. The warmth spreading through her chest felt real. Then kiss me, she whispered. Nikolai made a sound between a growl and a groan, and then his mouth was on hers. His lips were cold but not unpleasantly so, firm and demanding as he kissed her with centuries of practice and barely restrained hunger. Gemma gasped against his mouth, and his arms came around her, pulling her against his body. Kissing him was like diving into an ice-cold lake, shocking and exhilarating and overwhelming. He tasted like winter and darkness and something indefinably other, and every nerve in her body lit up with response. When his tongue swept across her lower lip, she opened for him without thought, and the kiss deepened into something that made her knees weak. Nikolai pulled back with visible effort, his eyes glowing silver in the lamplight. "We should stop." "Why?" Gemma was breathing hard, her hands fisted in his shirt. "Because if we don't stop now, I'm going to carry you upstairs to my chambers and spend the rest of the night showing you exactly how thoroughly I want you. And you deserve better than being seduced by a desperate vampire in the middle of a crisis." His voice was rough, strained with control. "You deserve romance, courtship, a choice made without fear or adrenaline clouding your judgment." "What if I want to be seduced by a desperate vampire?" He laughed, the sound startled and genuine. "Gemma Harrington, you are either the bravest or most reckless woman I've ever encountered." "Can I be both?" She smiled up at him, feeling reckless indeed. "Nikolai, I know this is fast, I know it's crazy, but I also know that I've never felt like this about anyone. And I don't want to waste time pretending I'm not affected when clearly we both are. You're affected because I'm exotic and dangerous, and you've been through trauma. Those aren't good reasons to. I'm affected because you look at me like I matter. Because you've been honest about the danger instead of lying to make yourself seem better. Because you stopped those horses and saved my life, and then immediately worried about how to keep me safe instead of taking advantage." Gemma reached up to touch his face, feeling the cold, smooth skin. "I trust you, Nikolai. Maybe that's foolish, but it's true. So stop trying to protect me from yourself and just be honest. Do you want me?" His eyes flared bright silver, with an intensity that terrifies me. "Then stop fighting it." She pulled his face down to hers and kissed him again, pouring everything she felt into it, the fear, the attraction, the bizarre certainty that this impossible thing between them was somehow right. This time Nikolai didn't pull away. He kissed her back with the full force of his restrained hunger, his hands sliding into her hair, his body pressing against hers. Gemma felt herself lifted effortlessly, and then she was being carried through the halls of Shadowmere Hall with vampire speed. His chambers were at the far end of the house, a sprawling suite of rooms decorated in dark colors and expensive fabrics. He set her down in front of a massive bed and stepped back, giving her space. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, and his voice was barely human now, rough with need. "Once we do this, it changes everything between us." "Good," Gemma said, and reached for him. They came together with desperate intensity, all the fear and adrenaline and impossible attraction of the past days crystallizing into pure need. Nikolai's hands were everywhere, cold against her flushed skin, and his mouth traced patterns down her throat that made her arch against him. When his fangs scraped gently over her pulse point, she gasped. "I won't bite you," he murmured against her skin. "Not without your explicit permission, never without that." "What if I want you to?" He pulled back to look at her, his eyes wild. "Don't offer that unless you mean it. A vampire's bite creates a connection, a link between us. It's not binding like turning you would be, but it's not nothing either." "I mean it," Gemma said, surprising herself. But it was true. She wanted to be connected to him, wanted to feel what it was like to share blood with a creature of legend. "I trust you." Nikolai's control shattered. He kissed her fiercely, walking her backward until she fell onto the bed, and then his body covered hers. They shed clothes frantically, and Gemma had a moment to appreciate the otherworldly perfection of him before he was touching her everywhere, cold hands on hot skin, creating delicious contrast. When he finally sank his fangs into her throat, the pain was sharp and bright, but fleeting. Then euphoria flooded through her, pleasure so intense she cried out. She felt him drinking, felt the pull of his mouth, and instead of weakness, there was only connection. Like a circuit completing, energy flowing between them, binding them together in a way that went beyond physical. He took only a little, pulling back to seal the wound with his tongue. His eyes were pure silver now, glowing in the darkness, and when he claimed her body fully, she felt complete in a way she'd never experienced before. They moved together with desperate intensity, finding rhythm despite how new this was, despite every reason it shouldn't work. Nikolai murmured things in languages she didn't understand, his cold lips against her heated skin, and Gemma gave herself over to sensation, to the impossible, perfect feeling of being with him. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Gemma's heart gradually slowing while Nikolai's remained still and silent in his chest. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her back, and she rested her head over where his heart should beat. "I can hear your thoughts," he said softly, "wondering how I can seem so alive without a heartbeat." Something like that. She pressed a kiss to his cold chest. "Does it bother you? Being dead but not dead?" "It used to. For the first century, I mourned everything I'd lost. Warmth, heartbeat, the ability to walk in sunlight, taste food, all the small things that make humans feel alive. But I've had 800 years to adjust. Now it simply is what I am." "Do you miss the sunlight most?" "Actually, no. I miss food." A hint of amusement colored his tone. "I was particularly fond of fresh bread and honey. The smell of it baking would make me absurdly happy. Now I can't even remember what it tasted like. Just that I loved it." Gemma propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "What about the blood? Do you hate needing it?" "I hate what it makes me, the predator instinct that comes with the hunger. But the act itself, when done with consent and care, can be intimate, as you just experienced." His hand came up to touch the healed punctures on her throat. "How do you feel?" "Strange. Good strange, but definitely strange, like I can feel you somehow, even though you're not in my head. That's the blood bond. It's temporary, will fade in a few days. But while it lasts, you'll sense my emotions, possibly some of my thoughts if I'm not careful to shield them. And I'll sense yours." His expression grew serious. "I'm sorry. I should have explained more thoroughly before offering that. In the moment, I wasn't thinking clearly." "I'm not sorry. It's actually kind of nice, knowing you're there." She settled back against his chest. "Will the council be able to sense it? The bond?" "Yes. Which means they'll know without doubt that I've claimed you in truth, not just in word. It will make the politics more complicated." "Will it help or hurt our case?" "Both? Probably. It proves you're not just a random human I'm protecting out of sentiment. The bond makes you part of my household, which gives me more legal standing to shield you. But it also proves I'm personally compromised, which the council will use to argue I'm unfit to make objective decisions about human interaction." Gemma was quiet for a moment, processing. "Do you regret it?" "No." The answer was immediate and firm. "I regret the danger I've put you in, the normal life I've stolen from you. But I don't regret this. Being with you feels like the first real thing I've done in centuries." She tilted her head up to kiss him softly. "Then we'll figure out the rest, together." They spent the night in Nikolai's chambers, alternating between conversation and passion, learning each other in the way new lovers do. He told her about centuries of history he'd witnessed, about the vampire world hidden beneath human society, about the allies and enemies he'd made over the years. She told him about growing up in Boston, about her love of history that had led to her volunteering at festivals, about the normal dreams she'd had before vampires became real. As dawn approached, Nikolai grew quieter. "I need to make calls today while you sleep. My allies need to know what's happened, and I need to start preparing our defense for the council hearing." "What will you tell them?" "The truth. That I saved a human without thought for consequences, that I've claimed her under my protection, and that I'm prepared to fight anyone who tries to harm her." He pulled her closer. "Some will support me. Others will think I've gone mad, but I need to know who stands where before we face the council formally. And if most of them side with the council, then we'll deal with that when it comes." He kissed her forehead. "Try not to worry. You're safe here, and I won't let anything happen to you." But Gemma heard what he didn't say, that protecting her might cost him everything. The next week fell into a strange rhythm. Gemma slept during part of the day, explored the estate, read extensively about vampire politics and history from Nikolai's library. At night, Nikolai worked in his study, making calls and receiving visitors who arrived under cover of darkness. She met some of them, Ancient vampires with strange names and stranger powers, all coming to pledge support or extract promises from their king. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with barely concealed disdain. All seemed shocked that Nikolai had bonded with a human. "They think I've weakened you," Gemma said one night after a particularly tense meeting with a vampire called Lucian, who'd made his disapproval abundantly clear. "They think I've made myself vulnerable," Nikolai corrected. "In vampire culture, having something you care about more than power is seen as a liability. It gives your enemies leverage." "Does it? Make you vulnerable, I mean?" He pulled her into his arms, and she felt the now familiar cold of him against her skin. "Absolutely. If the council wanted to destroy me, the surest way would be to threaten you. I would give up my crown, my territories, my life, to keep you safe. That makes me weak in their eyes. But strong in mine," Gemma said softly. "Caring about someone isn't weakness. It's what makes you different from the monsters you're afraid of becoming. You have a remarkable ability to find light in darkness, Gemma Harrington." He kissed her slowly, thoroughly. "It's one of the many things I'm learning to love about you." The word love hung between them, new and fragile and terrifying. Neither of them pushed it further, but Gemma felt it growing with each day they spent together. This impossible connection that had formed so quickly but felt so solid. The blood bond had faded after a few days, as Nikolai predicted, but the emotional connection remained. Gemma found herself thinking about him constantly during the daylight hours when he rested. She'd catch herself smiling at remembered conversations, or aching with want even though they spent every night together. She was falling in love with a vampire king, and it should have been ridiculous, but instead felt inevitable. 2 weeks after their arrival at Shadowmere Hall, Nikolai received the formal summons. The council demanded his presence at a hearing to address charges of violating the first law of secrecy and endangering vampire society through reckless exposure. "When?" Gemma asked, reading over his shoulder at the ornate letter. 3 days from now, in the eternal court beneath the city." His jaw was tight. "They're not wasting time." "What happens at the hearing?" "I'll present my case for why my actions were justified. They'll present their evidence of wrongdoing. Witnesses may be called. Then the council will vote on my punishment, if any." "Will I have to be there?" "Yes. You're central to the entire situation. They'll want to question you, assess whether you're trustworthy." He turned to face her, his expression grave. "Gemma, these next few days are going to be difficult. The Eternal Court is not like this house. It's the heart of our world, filled with ancient vampires who see humans as inferior at best. You'll need to be strong, careful, and above all, honest. Any hint of deception will be used against us." "I can do that." She took his cold hands in hers. "I'll tell them exactly what happened, exactly how I feel, and they can make of it what they will." "That's what I'm afraid of." But he pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "If things go badly, if the council rules against me, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise you'll accept their protection and return to your human life. Don't try to fight for me. Don't refuse their terms. Just go back to your world and live." "Nikolai, I'm not going to. Promise me." His voice was fierce. "I can face exile, imprisonment, even execution. But I cannot face eternity knowing you were harmed because of your loyalty to me. Please, Gemma, give me this." She wanted to argue, to tell him she wouldn't abandon him no matter what the council decided. But she saw the desperation in his eyes and recognized it for what it was, the same protective instinct that had made him stop those horses in the first place. "I promise," she lied, knowing he could probably sense the deception, but hoping he wouldn't call her on it. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and they spent the next 3 days barely leaving his chambers, making love and talking and simply being together, storing up moments against an uncertain future. On the night of the hearing, Nikolai dressed in formal clothing that made him look every inch the vampire king. Black suit with silver embroidery, a high collar, a cloak that seemed to drink the light. His white hair was pulled back, emphasizing his sharp features, and his gray eyes were cold and regal. He looked magnificent and terrifying, and Gemma felt a surge of pride that this impossibly beautiful creature had chosen her. For herself, she wore a simple black dress Nikolai had provided, elegant but understated. He'd explained that she needed to look respectful, but not like she was trying to impress the council. Just herself, honest and human. They drove back to the city as the sun set, but instead of going to her old neighborhood, Nikolai navigated to an industrial area near the waterfront. He parked behind a warehouse and led her to what looked like a service entrance. The Eternal Court exists beneath the modern city, he explained as they descended stairs that seemed to go on forever. It was built 300 years ago when this area was still wilderness, and we've maintained it in secret ever since. The entrance moves periodically to prevent human discovery. The stairs ended in a vast underground chamber that took Gemma's breath away. It looked like a cathedral carved from living stone, with soaring ceilings and columns that glowed with their own pale light. Hundreds of vampires filled the space, all of them pale and beautiful and cold, their eyes tracking Gemma with predatory interest. At the far end of the chamber, a raised dais held 7 ornate thrones. 6 were occupied by vampires who radiated ancient power. The 7th, slightly larger throne sat empty. "That's mine," Nikolai murmured. "The Council of 6 and the Territorial Kings make up the Eternal Court's governing body. Tonight, I stand before them as the accused rather than as one of their number." They walked down the central aisle, every eye in the chamber following their progress. Gemma kept her head high, refusing to show fear even though her heart was racing. She could feel the weight of all those predatory gazes, the hunger barely leashed. Nikolai's hand at the small of her back was steady and cold, a reminder that she wasn't alone. When they reached the dais, one of the council members stood. She was a woman who looked about 40, with dark hair shot through with silver and eyes like chips of ice. Nikolai Shadowmere, King of the Northern Territories and bearer of the Crimson Seal. You stand accused of violating the first law of secrecy through flagrant display of vampire abilities in front of multiple human witnesses. How do you plead? "I acknowledge that I revealed my nature through my actions," Nikolai said, his voice carrying through the chamber. "But I dispute that this constitutes a violation of the first law, as the circumstances were extraordinary and my intervention prevented greater exposure." "You stopped a runaway carriage with your bare hands in broad daylight in front of a crowd of humans," another council member said. This one a man with silver hair and a scarred face. "You then made contact with the human passenger and subsequently claimed her under your personal protection in direct defiance of council enforcers. These are not the actions of someone concerned with secrecy. These are the actions of someone who refused to let an innocent die when I had the power to prevent it." Nikolai's voice didn't rise, but authority rang in every word. "The first law exists to protect our society from human persecution. But a single act of heroism witnessed during a public event where strange occurrences are expected does not threaten that protection. The humans who saw me stop the horses assumed I was part of the festival entertainment, a stunt performer with hidden equipment. Only one human knows the truth of what I am, and she stands before you now." All eyes turned to Gemma. She felt pinned by hundreds of cold stares, but she lifted her chin and met them steadily. "Gemma Harrington," the dark-haired councilwoman said, "you are the human at the center of this situation. Tell us in your own words what happened on the day in question." Gemma took a breath and spoke clearly. "I was riding in a historical carriage for the Victorian Festival. Something spooked the horses and they bolted toward a cliff. I was going to die. Then Nikolai appeared and stopped them, and he saved my life. I didn't know what he was at first, but I figured it out later based on what I'd seen." "And when you realized you'd discovered the existence of vampires, what did you do?" "I was scared, but I was also grateful. Nikolai came to check on me, to make sure I was okay after my injury. He explained what he was, what I'd been exposed to. He offered to help me hide from your council, because he knew I'd be in danger." "Did he threaten you? Coerce you in any way?" "No. He was honest about the danger, but he never forced me to do anything. I chose to trust him." Gemma glanced at Nikolai, drawing strength from his presence. "He spent the past 2 weeks trying to figure out how to protect me while still respecting the laws of your world. That doesn't sound like someone who's reckless with secrecy. It sounds like someone trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation." "The right thing would have been to glamour you immediately and make you forget," the scarred vampire said. "Instead, King Shadowmere chose to claim you, to bond with you, to essentially declare that your life matters more to him than our laws. That is not acceptable behavior from one who is supposed to set an example. I will not apologize for valuing human life, Nikolai said, and now there was steel in his voice. I have spent 4 centuries building a society where vampires and humans can coexist without constant bloodshed, where we feed consensually, where we protect rather than prey upon the vulnerable. If that philosophy is now considered a crime, then convict me. But know that you're convicting me for embodying the very principles I've tried to instill in our kind. Murmurs ran through the assembled vampires. Some sounded approving, others angry. The council members exchanged glances, some wordless communication passing between them. Finally, the dark-haired woman spoke again. The council will deliberate. Nikolai Shadowmere, you and the human will wait in the chamber while we discuss your fate. They were led to a smaller room off the main hall, guarded by 2 stern-faced vampires. The moment the door closed, Gemma turned to Nikolai. How did I do? Perfectly. You were honest, brave, and you made them see you as a person rather than a problem. He pulled her into his arms. Whatever happens now, know that I don't regret any of this. Not saving you, not claiming you, not falling... He broke off, jaw tight. Not falling in love with me? Gemma finished softly. His eyes met hers, storm gray and intense. Is it too soon to say that? Too presumptuous given the circumstances? Not if I feel the same way. She reached up to touch his face. I love you, Nikolai Shadowmere. I love your strength and your gentleness and your determination to be better than your nature. I love that you saved me, even though it cost you everything. And I love that you look at me like I'm precious instead of prey. He kissed her desperately, and Gemma tasted something like fear in it, the knowledge that they might not have much time left together. They stood wrapped in each other's arms for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. When the door opened again, they separated reluctantly. The dark-haired councilwoman stood in the doorway. The council has reached a decision. You will return to the chamber to hear the verdict. Back in the great hall, the 6 council members stood in a line before their thrones. The assembled vampires had fallen silent, all attention fixed on the dais. Nikolai Shadowmere, the councilwoman began, her voice formal. The council has reviewed the evidence and testimony regarding your actions. We find that while your intentions were honorable, your methods were reckless and have created a precedent that could destabilize our carefully maintained secrecy. Gemma's heart sank. That didn't sound like it was leading to acquittal. However, the woman continued, we also recognize that your actions did not result in any lasting exposure. The humans who witnessed your strength have attributed it to festival theatrics. Only this one human knows the truth, and she is now bound to you by blood and by choice. Therefore, the council rules as follows. She paused, and the silence was suffocating. You will retain your crown and your territories, but you will accept 2 conditions. First, Gemma Harrington must be formally brought into our world. She cannot return to her human life with knowledge of our existence. What does that mean? Gemma asked before she could stop herself. Brought into your world? The councilwoman's gaze fixed on her. It means you have 2 options, human. You may be turned, becoming a vampire yourself, and thus bound by our laws permanently. Or you may become a registered consort, a human who lives within vampire society under the protection of a vampire master. In your case, that master would be King Shadowmere. And the second condition? Nikolai asked, his voice carefully neutral. You will accept a council observer in your territories for the next decade, someone who will report on how you implement your reforms, ensure you're not putting vampire society at risk with your policies regarding humans. The woman's expression was cold. This is not negotiable. Accept these terms or face exile and execution. Gemma felt Nikolai tense beside her. A decade of surveillance, of having his every action reported to the council. It was a leash, a way of controlling him even while nominally leaving him in power. I accept the council's terms, Nikolai said after a long pause. But I have a condition of my own. The observer you send must be someone I approve of, not a spy intent on undermining my rule. Give me 3 names and I'll choose from among them. The council members conferred briefly. Then the scarred vampire stepped forward. Acceptable. We will provide names within the week. Do you accept these terms, King Shadowmere? I do. And you, Gemma Harrington? Do you accept the choice before you? To become vampire or consort, knowing you can never return to your human life as it was? Every eye in the chamber fixed on Gemma. She felt the weight of the decision, the magnitude of what she was choosing. Become a vampire, give up her humanity entirely, or become a consort, remaining human, but forever tied to Nikolai and the vampire world. She looked at Nikolai and saw fear in his eyes, fear that she would reject this, would choose some impossible third option. Fear that, even now, after everything, he would lose her. I choose to remain human, Gemma said clearly, and I choose Nikolai Shadowmere as my vampire master and consort bond. If that means I can never go back to my old life, so be it. He's worth more to me than anything I'm leaving behind. The relief in Nikolai's expression was profound. He reached for her hand, and she laced her fingers through his cold ones. Then it is decided, the councilwoman declared. Let it be recorded that Gemma Harrington is now formally recognized as consort to Nikolai Shadowmere, king of the Northern Territories. She is afforded all protections and responsibilities that status entails. This hearing is concluded. The assembled vampires began to disperse, their voices rising in conversation. Some shot Gemma looks of curiosity or disdain, but others nodded approvingly at Nikolai. The political implications would take time to unfold, but for now, they'd won. Nikolai pulled her into his arms, right there in the center of the eternal court, not caring who saw. You chose me, he said, and his voice was raw with emotion. You gave up everything to stay with me. I chose us, Gemma corrected, and I don't feel like I gave up anything. I feel like I gained everything that matters. He kissed her there in front of the entire court, a declaration as clear as any words. This human was his, and he was hers, and anyone who wanted to challenge that would have to go through him first. When they finally broke apart, the dark-haired councilwoman approached them. Up close, Gemma could see that her eyes held a hint of warmth despite their icy color. That was well done, both of you, she said quietly. Not many humans would have the courage to choose this life willingly, and not many vampires would risk so much for love. Perhaps there's hope for Nikolai's vision of our future after all. Thank you, Counselor, Nikolai said, inclining his head respectfully. Don't thank me yet. The observer we send will report everything, and the Council will be watching for any sign that your reforms are weakening our position. But for now, you have your crown and your consort. Use both wisely. She turned to Gemma. And you, child, have bound yourself to a difficult path. Being a vampire's consort is not an easy life. You'll age while he remains unchanged. You'll need to learn our laws, our customs, our ways, and you'll be a target for anyone who wants to hurt the king. Are you certain you're prepared for that? I'm certain I'd rather face those challenges with Nikolai than live a safe, empty life without him, Gemma said honestly. The counselor smiled, a brief warming of her cold features. Love, it makes fools and heroes of us all. Go before I remember I'm supposed to be stern and disapproving. They left the eternal court hand in hand, climbing back up those endless stairs toward the city above. When they emerged into the night air, Gemma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over her. I can never go back, she said quietly. My family, my friends, my job, that life is over. We can arrange contact with your family if you wish, Nikolai said gently. Supervised visits, phone calls. You won't have to completely cut them off. But I can never tell them the truth. About you, about what I've become. Gemma leaned against him. It feels like a kind of death. I know. I'm sorry. If I could give you back your normal life, I would. No, you wouldn't, and I wouldn't want you to. She looked up at him. I meant what I said in there. You're worth it. This is worth it. I just need a moment to mourn what I'm leaving behind. He held her while she cried quietly, his cold arms steady around her. When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, he produced a handkerchief from his pocket with old-fashioned courtesy. Better? He asked softly. Better. I'm okay. I will be okay. She managed a smile. So what now? Do I get a vampire handbook? A guide to being a consort? Something like that. There's a lot you'll need to learn about our laws and customs, about how to navigate vampire society. But we'll take it slowly. He guided her toward the car. For tonight, Let's just go home to Shadowmere Hall. Tomorrow we can start planning the future." "Home," Gemma repeated, testing the word. "I like that." They drove back to the estate in comfortable silence, the tension of the hearing finally draining away. By the time they pulled up to the Gothic manor, Gemma felt exhausted in every way possible. Nikolai carried her up to his chambers, and they shed their formal clothing in favor of comfortable sleep clothes. Well, Gemma wore sleep clothes. Nikolai simply stripped to his bare skin, comfortable in his supernatural beauty. "This is going to take some getting used to," Gemma said, eyeing his perfect pale form. "What is?" "Having a boyfriend who looks like he was carved by a Renaissance sculptor. It's intimidating." He laughed, pulling her into bed beside him. "You could be turned, you know. Become equally beautiful and supernatural." "I thought about it," Gemma admitted, "during the hearing when they offered the choice. But I don't want to be a vampire, Nikolai. I want to be human. I want to age and experience life in all its messy, temporary glory. And yes, that means I'll die long before you do. But that makes every moment more precious, doesn't it?" His arms tightened around her. "I'm going to lose you. In 50 years, 60 if you're lucky, you'll be gone and I'll have eternity left to live without you." "Then we'd better make the most of the time we have." She kissed his cold chest. "No regrets, remember? We chose this, both of us. Let's choose to be happy instead of mourning what we'll lose eventually." "You're very wise for such a young human." "I'm 26, not 12, and wisdom is relative." She yawned, suddenly overwhelmingly tired. "Can vampires sleep? Or do you just lie there all night being broody?" "I can sleep, though I don't need to as much as humans do, but I enjoy it, especially with you in my arms." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Rest now. Tomorrow begins our new life together." Gemma drifted off feeling safe and loved, cocooned in the arms of a vampire king who'd saved her from death and chosen her over politics. It was insane and impossible and perfect. The next weeks were an adjustment. Gemma had to officially quit her job and break her lease via phone, citing a sudden family emergency that required her to relocate indefinitely. It hurt to lie to people she cared about, but there was no alternative. Her parents were hardest, demanding details she couldn't provide, worrying about her in ways she couldn't address. Eventually, Nikolai arranged a carefully supervised visit where Gemma could reassure her parents in person that she was safe, happy, and living with someone who cared for her. He glamored them slightly to accept the situation without too many questions, and Gemma felt guilty about that, but also relieved. She threw herself into learning about vampire society with the same enthusiasm she'd brought to historical studies. Nikolai provided her with books, introduced her to key members of his court, taught her the intricate rules of vampire politics. It was fascinating and overwhelming in equal measure. The council's observer arrived 3 weeks after the hearing. Nikolai had chosen a vampire named Theron from among the 3 names provided, a relatively young vampire who'd earned a reputation for fairness. He was formal and watchful, but not hostile, and after the first awkward week, Gemma found she could mostly ignore his presence. Life at Shadowmere Hall developed a new rhythm. Gemma would wake in the afternoon, spend time reading or exploring the extensive grounds, work on a project Nikolai had given her documenting human-vampire relations throughout history. In the evenings, she and Nikolai would spend time together before he had to attend to his duties as king. Some nights he held court at Shadowmere Hall, with vampires from his territories coming to petition or report. Gemma attended these sessions, learning to recognize the key players in Northern Territories' politics. Some treated her with respect, others with barely concealed contempt, but all acknowledged her status as Nikolai's consort. And the nights when he had no duties, they spent together. Making love, talking for hours, simply being together. Gemma learned his body the way she learned vampire law, with dedicated attention to detail. She discovered what made him gasp despite his supernatural control, learned to read the silver glow of his eyes that meant his desire was rising. He was an attentive lover, patient and skilled and determined to give her pleasure. The cold of his body against her warmth created delicious contrasts, and when he fed from her, the euphoria that came with his bite made everything more intense. I could become addicted to this, she told him one night as they lay tangled together, her blood thrumming from his recent feeding. Many human consorts do. The euphoria from a vampire's bite can be intoxicating. His fingers traced the healing punctures on her throat. If you ever feel like I'm feeding too often, tell me. I don't want to turn this into something unhealthy. I will. But right now it just feels good, connected. She pressed closer to him. How much blood do you actually need? Less than most vampires because I'm old and powerful. I can go weeks between feedings if necessary. But having a willing partner makes it easier to maintain control, less temptation to hunt impulsively. He nuzzled her neck. And I enjoy feeding from you specifically. Your blood tastes like sunlight and joy, if that makes sense. Not really, but I'll take it as a compliment. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Gemma loved making him laugh, loved seeing the ancient sadness lift from his features when he was happy. 3 months after the hearing, on a cold January night, Nikolai took her to a cliff overlooking the forest. Stars blazed overhead, and the world seemed painted in shades of silver and shadow. This is where I come when I need to remember what I'm fighting for, he said, his arm around her waist. The beauty of the natural world, the vastness of existence beyond vampire politics. It centers me. It's gorgeous, Gemma breathed, staring at the view. I wanted to bring you here tonight because I have something to ask you. He turned her to face him, and in the starlight, his white hair and pale skin seemed to glow. Gemma Harrington, I know we've only been together for a few months. I know you've already given up so much to be with me. But I need to ask for more. Her heart began to race. What are you asking? In vampire culture, consorts are typically temporary arrangements, a human companion for a decade or two before they're released back to their own world or turned. But I don't want temporary with you. I want everything you're willing to give me for as long as you live. He pulled out a small box, and Gemma's breath caught as he opened it to reveal an antique ring with a dark red stone. This is bloodstone, given to me 3 centuries ago by a human I saved from a war. He told me to save it for someone worth dying for. I didn't understand what he meant until I met you. Nikolai. Tears pricked her eyes. By vampire law, we're already bound, but I want to honor your human traditions too. I'm asking you to marry me, Gemma, to be my wife in human terms and my eternal consort in vampire terms, to share whatever time you have with me, knowing I'll love you until your last breath and beyond. Yes, Gemma said, laughing through tears. Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, the bloodstone glowing like captured fire. Then he kissed her with all the passion and tenderness she'd come to expect from him, and Gemma felt her heart swell with joy. I love you, she murmured against his lips, my vampire king. And I love you, my brave human. He pulled back to look at her, his storm-gray eyes soft. You saved me, you know. Not from the horses or the ravine, but from 800 years of loneliness. You made me believe in hope again. Then we saved each other. Because you showed me that there's magic in the world, and that even someone like me can be precious to someone extraordinary. They stood together on that cliff edge, wrapped in each other's arms as the stars wheeled overhead. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges and political complications and the inevitable march of time. But they had each other, and for now that was everything. They married in spring, a private ceremony at Shadowmere Hall with just a few trusted witnesses. Theron, the council observer, attended and later reported to the council that the Northern Territory's king had formally wed his human consort in a ceremony that combined vampire and human traditions. The report was met with mixed reactions, but no one challenged it. Gemma wore a gown of ivory silk that Nikolai had commissioned, something that would have been appropriate in his human era but altered to suit modern sensibilities. He wore black with silver embroidery, looking every inch the vampire king. And when he spoke his vows in the ancient language of his people before translating them to English, Gemma felt the weight of centuries in the words. I pledge my strength to protect you, my power to shield you, my eternity to love you, he said, slipping a matching bloodstone ring onto her finger. From this night forward, you are mine and I am yours, until death or beyond. I pledge my heart to love you, my life to share with you, my humanity to remind you who you are, Gemma responded, her voice steady despite her tears. From this night forward, you are mine and I am yours, until death or beyond. When they kissed to seal the vows, every vampire present felt the surge of power that came from a true bonding. This wasn't just political alliance or convenient arrangement. This was real, deep, transformative love. The celebration that followed was elaborate by vampire standards, with blood wine and entertainment that spanned centuries of culture. Gemma met vampires from across the northern territories, nobles and warriors and scholars who'd come to honor their king's wedding. Most were polite, some were warm, and a few remained coldly disapproving, but all acknowledged her right to be there. Late in the night, when most of the guests had departed, Nikolai swept her up in his arms and carried her to their chambers. "Hello, wife," he murmured, and the word sent shivers through her. "Hello, husband," she replied, still getting used to the term. "How does it feel to be married after 800 years of bachelorhood?" "Like I've finally found the missing piece of my soul." He laid her carefully on their bed. "And now I intend to spend the rest of the night showing you exactly how much I adore you." He made good on that promise, worshipping her body with hands and mouth and fangs until she was breathless and trembling. When he finally joined with her, it felt different than before, more profound, as if the vows they'd spoken had created a new connection between them. "I feel you," Gemma gasped as he moved inside her, "not like the blood bond, but deeper, like you're part of me." The marriage bond. It's rare, only forms when the love is true and strong. His eyes glowed silver in the darkness. "It means we're connected now, truly joined. I'll always be able to find you, feel your emotions, know if you're in danger." "Good," Gemma said, pulling him down for a fierce kiss. "I want you connected to me. I want all of it." They moved together with desperate passion, finding completion that left them both shaking. Afterward, Nikolai held her close, and Gemma felt truly, perfectly content for the first time in her life. The years that followed had their challenges. Vampire politics never ceased, and there were always those who saw Gemma as a weakness to exploit or an oddity to eliminate. But with Nikolai at her side and her own growing understanding of vampire society, she navigated the dangers with increasing skill. She became something of an ambassador between human and vampire worlds, helping Nikolai refine his policies regarding consensual feeding and human protection. Some vampires embraced her ideas, others resisted, but slowly the northern territories became known as a place where humans and vampires could coexist more peacefully. Theron's decade of observation ended with a report that surprised many. The northern territories under Nikolai's reformed rule were actually more stable and prosperous than traditionalist territories. Human-vampire violence was down, voluntary blood donation was up, and the secrecy of vampire society was maintained without requiring constant intimidation of humans. The council grudgingly acknowledged the success, and other territorial kings began to quietly inquire about implementing similar reforms. Nikolai's vision of a better vampire world was slowly spreading. But time, as always, moved forward. Gemma aged, her 26-year-old body giving way to 30, then 40, then 50. Nikolai remained unchanged, eternally young, watching as gray appeared in her hair and lines formed around her eyes. "You're still beautiful," he told her one night as they lay in bed together. She was 53, and her body showed the years. "More beautiful, actually. Every line on your face is a map of the life we've lived together, the love we've shared." "You're a terrible liar," Gemma said, but she smiled. "I'm aging, and you're not. That's the reality. But I don't regret choosing to stay human, Nikolai. I've lived more in the past 27 years with you than I would have in a century of normal life." "I know, but it doesn't make it easier, watching time take you from me." His hand traced her graying hair. "I keep thinking about what happens when you're gone, the emptiness that's coming." "Then don't think about it. Focus on now. On what we have." She pulled him closer. "I'm not gone yet. I'm right here, and I intend to be here for decades more. Stop mourning me while I'm still alive." He kissed her fiercely, and the passion between them was undiminished by her aging body. If anything, it had grown deeper, more profound. They knew each other completely now, every scar and secret and shadow. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Nikolai threw a grand celebration that drew vampires from across the continent. Gemma was 83 by then, her body frail but her mind still sharp. She'd outlived normal human lifespan with help from Nikolai's blood, small doses that strengthened her without turning her, but even that couldn't stop time forever. 30 years with you, Nikolai said during his toast, his voice carrying through the hall. It's nothing compared to my 800-year existence, barely a heartbeat in vampire terms. Yet these 30 years have meant more to me than all the centuries before. Gemma taught me that immortality without love is just endless existence, but even a short life filled with love is eternal. There wasn't a dry eye in the hall, vampire or human. The guests who'd attended knew they were witnessing something rare, a love that transcended the boundaries between mortal and immortal. Gemma passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 91, having lived 65 years beyond that day. The horses had bolted toward the ravine. Nikolai held her as her heart slowed and finally stopped, his own still heart breaking in ways he didn't know were possible. He mourned her with the intensity of a creature who'd loved once and truly, knowing he'd never find that connection again. But he didn't retreat into darkness or bitterness. Instead, he threw himself into continuing the work they'd started together, making the vampire world safer for the humans who lived within it. He kept Shadowmere Hall exactly as it had been when she was alive, her books still on the shelves, her favorite chair still positioned by the library window. Sometimes, on quiet nights, he would sit in that chair and talk to her as if she could still hear him, telling her about the continued progress of their reforms, about the changes happening in vampire society. And he never remarried, never took another consort. The council occasionally pressured him to choose a vampire companion, someone eternal who wouldn't leave him alone. But Nikolai refused. "I had my eternal love," he would say. "Some creatures get 800 years of searching. I found mine in 30 years and lost her to time, but I won't dishonor what we had by pretending anyone could replace her. Gemma was unique, precious, worth every moment of pain her loss brings." He ruled the Northern Territories for centuries more, continuing to push for reforms and better treatment of humans. And though he lived without her, he never forgot the brave woman who'd trusted a vampire king, who'd given up her normal life for a love that transcended species, who'd taught him that even monsters could be redeemed through connection. On the cliff where he'd proposed, Nikolai erected a marker with simple words: Gemma Harrington Shadowmere, wife, consort, the light that taught darkness how to love. And every year, on the anniversary of the day he'd stopped those runaway horses, Nikolai would return to that spot and speak to the stars, telling them about the woman who'd changed everything, who'd made an 800-year-old vampire believe in hope again. She was gone, but the love they'd shared continued to shape the vampire world for the better. And in that legacy, Gemma lived on, eternal after all.